Special thank you to parents that were able to adjust their schedules to be here as well. I would like to introduce Mr. Bobby Truhe. Mr. Truhe is here to talk to you about digital citizenship today. Please pay good attention. He will be available for a few questions afterwards. Mr. Truhe is with KSB Law Firm, School Law. Okay? And now I turn it over to him.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm Bobby. Hey, Bobby. Hey guys, how's it going? Today we're going to talk about digital citizenship. So when it says KSB School Law, that's because I am what they call a school lawyer. So basically what that means is, I shut off presentations. Okay, so being a school lawyer, what that means is myself and the other people in my law firm, we represent public schools. So we will get a call from an administrator saying something like, hey, we had these kids that were misbehaving on Yik Yak. We know who did it. What should we do? And so that's the sort of calls that I get. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about here today. I know that you've had training and you've had different assemblies and things like that on bullying, right? You guys have talked about bullying before, probably? Oh yeah, okay. So we're going to talk about that stuff. But other than just making sure that you know, don't be a bully, behave, act appropriately online, we're actually going to be talking about some of the legal consequences. So some of the things that can happen either with the court system, or getting in trouble here at school, if you're doing things online, which constitutes cyberbullying. We're going to talk about sexting. Does everybody know what I mean when I say sexting? Yep. Yep? Okay. Anybody ever heard of sexting happening? Come on, don't lie. Yeah, I know that you have. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, cyberbullying. Who here has seen or experienced or heard of somebody being mean online, basically? Raise your hands high. I'm not going to ask any questions. So pretty much everybody, right? We kind of already talked about sexting. So what we're going to talk about after we talk about cyberbullying and sexting are some things that you should think about and some things I want you to know about some of these consequences. Okay. So what I've got up here is obviously a screen full of some popular apps. We've got a few parents in here. Students, who here thinks that you could name most of these apps? Honestly, you think you could name most of these apps? Yeah. Yeah? Okay. How about parents or teachers? Anybody think you could name all these apps? Any parents in here want to take a run at it? Some? Okay. How about Twitter? Who's on Twitter? Facebook? On Facebook? Who uses Snapchat? So is Snapchat the coolest one now? Is that pretty much right? Okay. How about Kick Messenger? How about Ask? Ask.fm. Any Ask users? A few? Okay. How about Yik Yak? Not supposed to use it. Good. Well, we've seen some kids get in a lot of trouble using Yik Yak because the people at Yik Yak lead you to believe that it's completely anonymous, right? Nobody knows who you are. You can just see what other people around you are saying. That's not true. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that have happened to students who have used these different apps to engage in cyberbullying and sexting and some of the consequences that they've had to face. Who games online? PlayStation Network? Xbox Network?
Yeah.
Quite a few?
Yeah.
Hey, anybody ever sent messages to other people on the PlayStation or Xbox Network? Ever get random game requests for people to play? Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, right? So this same stuff, get this, we've had kids kicked out of school because of messages that they send using the PlayStation and Xbox networks. So it doesn't matter what type of technology we're talking about, right? If you use it inappropriately, you're going to get in trouble. Okay. Since Snapchat is your favorite, this would be a lot easier than showing your work in math, right? Okay. Cyberbullying. I know we said everybody here's pretty much heard of cyberbullying. This is a definition that most people are using. It's basically if you use technology, computers, phones, to engage in repeated and hostile behavior that's intended to harm somebody else. So if you've seen somebody doing something mean online, or if you've seen people ganging up on another person online, or making mean comments about them, if that happens frequently enough, it can amount to what we call cyberbullying. In Nebraska, we've actually got a statute. And the 79 statutes are the ones that apply to schools. So basically, if you engage in cyberbullying online, and especially if you're doing it at school, or it's my understanding that in the high school you guys will have one-to-one laptops next year. If you are using your one-to-one laptop to engage in cyberbullying, that constitutes doing something on school grounds. So for example, just the other day we had somebody that was on the varsity basketball team. They're on their way back to the school from a basketball game. And he's on Twitter sending basically private messages to another one of the kids that's on the bus, that's a freshman, and it's telling him, hey, when we get off the bus, you meet me outside. I'm going to beat you up. School finds out about it. There's a report made. They get screenshots of the messages that were sent. Boom, kids kicked off the basketball team for the rest of the year. That's because you have a right, as a student, you have a right to attend school. You have no right to engage in extracurricular activities. So playing basketball, wrestling, being in the play, Academica, FFA, whatever it is that you might be doing, you've got no right to participate in those things. So if you're caught engaging in an ongoing pattern of electronic abuse, which was added to basically account for cyberbullying, if you're caught doing those things, you can face any one of these consequences under Nebraska's laws. So loss of extracurricular privileges. There are some schools, because they've had people cyberbullying so much, that the student was told you will never be able to participate in extracurriculars the rest of the time you're in high school. This was a sophomore that did it at the time. Couldn't go to prom, couldn't walk across the stage at graduation, couldn't do any of those things, never went on any field trips. And so all of these things that are outside of the classroom that you like to do at school, none of those things are guaranteed to you. And so if you're engaging in cyberbullying, these consequences can happen to you, and that's especially true if you do it here at school. Loss of recess, suspension, expulsion. We've had kids that have been expelled for threatening other kids online, actually kicked out of school for the rest of the semester. We've had kids that have been assigned to alternative schools. So basically, your behavior was so bad and you were engaging in so much cyberbullying and inappropriate behavior that you got sent to a different school. And all of these things have happened as a result of cyberbullying. So here's a case from Seattle. So this is two high school girls. One goes on the Facebook wall of the other high school girl and posts something like that she's mean and fat and stupid. 21 of her friends, the mean girl, then go and like the comments on Facebook. You all know what I mean, right? They hit the like button. The school decides that not only are we going to impose consequences on the student that wrote the message, we're also going to impose consequences on every single person that liked the Facebook status. Those kids that got kicked out of school because they liked the status went to court. And they basically said to a judge, Judge, you can't let them kick us out of school just because we liked something on Facebook. And you know what the judge said? Yes, I can. He said, and this is a quote that I repeat all the time, essentially, liking something on Facebook, or favoriting something on Twitter, or retweeting somebody already tweeted, if you do those things, it's just like you're making that statement yourself. So if you see that somebody has said something mean online, and you approve that somehow, like it, retweet it, favorite it, whatever it might be, double tap it on Instagram, if you do that stuff, you can be held just as responsible as the person that initially made the post. Okay, pretty serious stuff if you think about how easy it is sometimes just to go online and hit the like button. You probably don't even think about it that much, right? You probably don't think about the consequences that could be associated with that. Here's another case where junior high kids made an Instagram account, and actually they had been doing this for several years, right? So they started when it was in 4th grade. They made an Instagram account where they thought that what we're going to do is say and do mean things to other kids in our class. They created the account anonymously. Nobody knew exactly who ran the account, but basically every Friday night they would put a message out which says, who should we take down next? They started saying and doing mean things to everybody in the school. Finally, the school got so sick of it that they called the cops. So the cops got a hold of Instagram, and Instagram turned over the IP addresses of all the people who had logged on to run that site. The cops were able to pinpoint exactly who it was. they were even able to pinpoint where the people were when they were making the posts on Instagram. Because once you engage in behavior like that, if the police get involved, they can pinpoint your location using your phone's GPS to within a couple feet of where you're standing. That's pretty crazy. And so if you think that you're creating an anonymous account, or you're using something like Yik Yak, or even Kick Messenger, I know you can message anonymously on that, or Snapchat even, if you think you're being anonymous, or if you think that they can't figure out what you're doing, you're wrong. And we'll talk about some of those cases here in a second too. This is the Kara Kowalski case. She created a Facebook page. It was a private page, so you had to be invited into it. And she called it Students Against Shay's Herpes. So basically they were saying that Shay was engaging in sexual acts with people in her class, and that she had a disease from doing it. Everything in the court file said it wasn't true. Shay never had herpes, but they wanted to start this rumor about her just to be mean. So people would go on and post messages and would say things about her, like they would post pictures where she had devil horns. They would post all kinds of mean things about her. And what the kids didn't realize is, when you post on Facebook or when you post on Instagram, all that is timestamped. So even if it doesn't show the exact time that you did it when you post it, on the servers at Facebook, they know exactly when you posted something. And they know, especially when you run a private page, that they can track who posted and when they posted it. So if you think you're being sneaky by leaving class and then going in the bathroom and getting on your phone and doing something, people can find out when you did it, right? Even if you've hidden date and time stamping. So that's what happened in this case. So basically, they found that Kara Kowalski, she was the one that started this page. Here are the consequences they imposed. They kicked her out of school for 10 days. She was on the basketball team. She was on the track team. They also instituted a 90-day social suspension. She got kicked off the basketball team for the rest of the year. She could not compete in track for the rest of the year. She could not go to her own prom. She could not go on the field trips, the senior class field trips. She couldn't do any of those things because she created this page. Right? And so she actually went to court and she said, but what about my rights to make the speech that I want to make? Right? What about my free speech rights? The Constitution protects what I say sometimes. And the judge said, you're right. But you created this, you accessed it at school, you intended for people to see it at school, you were picking on this poor girl at school. Shay, the girl who was the subject of the page, actually ended up missing several days of school because she was so embarrassed. So because the judge found all those things in this case, he said, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that some of the things that you said were not at school. It found its way to school. Right? It has disrupted what we're trying to do here. So sorry, your 90-day suspension from all social activities held up. We have seen these things happen in Nebraska. There was a really good wrestler a couple years ago. They got kicked off the wrestling team the night before district wrestling. Was probably going to go to state, was probably going to do pretty well. Got kicked off for what he'd said on social media. We've had people kicked off basketball teams. We've had people have to miss state FFA. We've had all kinds of different consequences in Nebraska because you have absolutely no right to participate in extracurricular activities. The law says you get to go to school, but when it comes to everything else, it's not protected. Right? So these are just some of the things that can happen for engaging in cyberbullying. Now, how about civil consequences? Does everybody know what I mean when I say civil? So basically in court, you've got criminal and then you've got civil, right? Civil is when somebody files a lawsuit against somebody else. So it's not a crime, but somebody's saying that you did something to me which caused me some kind of harm. We have had students and parents that have been sued for engaging in cyberbullying. Meaning they have to go to court, they have to sit up on the stand, they have to answer questions from the other lawyer. They often have to answer the question of, why would you have made that page? Why would you have said those things? And that's difficult, right? If you've ever said something mean, imagine sitting there in front of a judge, and imagine that judge and that lawyer asking you questions. Why would you say that? Why did you say that? What was your reasoning? You know, those sorts of things can be kind of scary, and I think people don't understand that if you get sued, and there have been a lot of parents and students who have been sued for engaging in cyberbullying activities, you're going to court. And in some cases, we haven't had a case like this in Nebraska, but in some cases, the people who have sued have won. So that students and their parents have had to actually pay money to the people that they bullied. So the victims here won these cases. In one case, the parents actually had their home and their car foreclosed on, meaning the parents lost their home because their kids were cyberbullies. They had to sell the house to pay the money to the victim of the bullying, right? In other cases, judges have said, you know what? If you're going to be that mean, and if you're going to engage in cyberbullying, we're going to put a restraining order on you. You are not allowed to contact that person using any electronic means, and you're not allowed to be within 500 feet of that person. It'd be kind of difficult to go to school if you can't be within 500 feet of somebody you're bullying, right? So kids have had to leave school, have had to go to a different school, have had to drop out of school, all because we're trying to get kids to stop bullying each other. Right? So sometimes, even though we sit in these assemblies and even though you talk about this stuff a lot, it's still happening, right? Would everybody agree? Some of this stuff is happening, people still being mean? Yeah, absolutely. So courts and judges are starting to become much more hard on students who engage in this kind of stuff. Here's a case where a student was changing after volleyball. So she's a junior in high school. She's changing after a volleyball practice. She's in the locker room. She is wearing nothing but her underwear. Some other kids on the team hold her down, take pictures of her, and put them up on Twitter. Now, what do you think happened when all the boys in the class saw the pictures of her in her underwear on Twitter? Screenshot. Oh, screenshots? Absolutely. Retweeted it, favorited it. We've got this picture floating around all over the place. The police estimated that by the time that Twitter was able to get onto this account and take it down a few hours later, over 200,000 people had seen the picture. That's crazy, right? I mean, and it was all because these girls held her down, took a picture, it was a prank. They said they were just joking, right? The parents of the girl who got held down and had the picture taken were so mortified, and the girl felt so bad, that the parents actually sued the other kids and their parents. This girl had to go seek counseling. She couldn't play any more sports. She basically dropped out of all activities. She transferred schools. It was really difficult for her because everybody had seen these pictures. People were bullying her because of the pictures, and none of it was her fault. And so they sued Twitter. The family sued the school. The family sued the students who took the pictures. And here's one thing I want you to remember. All these other ones, IIED, we call it infliction of emotional distress. That means if you're doing something to somebody and you're intentionally doing it to cause them distress, that can be something that somebody can sue you for. Assault and battery because they held her down, but here's the interesting one. Privacy. States like Nebraska have laws which say that if you do something to intentionally invade somebody else's privacy, you can be sued for it. So if you take a picture of somebody, we had a case just the other day where students were in the bathroom. One kid was at the urinal, another kid was at the urinal beside him. He put his phone over the top and took a picture. Turned it over to the cops. That student is probably now going to be charged with invasion of privacy, with creation of child pornography, with all sorts of things just because he reached over and took that picture. Might be tried as an adult. We'll talk about what that means in a second. But basically, just because he invaded this person's privacy, that other family might sue them. Had some pretty serious consequences for behavior that really he probably didn't even think that much about. Okay, Fulmer v. Swindler. Now this is a case that we had, this is from 2003, so it's pretty old. This was pretty bad. Middle school students created a website saying, "My teacher sucks." They compared the teacher to Hitler. They had a picture of the teacher decapitated on the page, like showed her head decapitated. Here's the one that made the judge really, really mad though. They had asked people in their class to make contributions to hire a hitman to kill the teacher. So the teacher was so upset that she actually ended up suing the kids. She sued some of her own students because they made this page, the teacher and her husband. The teacher had to quit her job. She had to go to counseling. It was a terrible deal. So the jury in this case, everybody know what I mean when I say a jury? So these are the people that when you're in court, they make the decision, right? You've got a judge and you've got the lawyers. The jury are the people that basically decide, if that person wins, how much money should they get? Or if you're in a criminal case, should that person really be found guilty or not? Well, the jury in this case thought that this was so bad that they gave the teacher $500,000. So these parents had to sell their house. They had a vacation house, they had to sell that. They had to sell their cars. They had to take extra jobs. And they ended up actually filing for what we call bankruptcy. They ran out of money to pay this, right? Because they had already sold everything that they owned. all because their kids went online and made this website. So it's pretty serious consequences that these parents had to face because of the middle school students who made the website. Okay, this is one that's really, I think, pretty scary because we've seen a lot of kids in Nebraska, and I'm talking about dozens of kids your age who have been charged with what we call making terroristic threats. Right? This is one of the most common things that we see when kids are bullying each other. They're charged with what we call making terroristic threats. A terroristic threat is a threat to commit any crime of violence. So for example, if I say that I'm going to punch you in the face, that is me saying that I'm going to commit a crime of violence. Right? So basically, if you're scared, and I want you to be scared, if I intend to terrorize you, then I can be charged with a crime of making terroristic threats. Right? That probably makes sense, right? If you hit somebody in the face, that's a crime. Right? You've assaulted them. But it's also a crime to threaten to do that and to want to scare them. So we've seen lots of cases where a student will get on Facebook or will get on Twitter or will say something to another student in messaging somehow and say, I'm going to beat you up tomorrow. Well, if the student that receives that was intended to be scared, then the person who said it can be charged with this crime. Now the same thing goes if you do it in reckless disregard of the risk of causing the terror. So basically what that means is, even if you're joking. So what do you think when kids are charged with terroristic threats, what do you think is the #1 thing that they say to judges as to why they did something? Just joking, right? I was just kidding. I was never actually going to beat him up. I was never actually going to go start a fight with that person. But guess what? It doesn't matter. Because if the person who received the message feels scared, if they really think that you're going to beat them up, even if you were kidding, you can be charged with this crime. We have had kids put in handcuffs and walked out of school because they got on Yik Yak and they said that I'm gonna bring a bomb to school tomorrow and I'm gonna blow up the school buildings. What do you think that kid said when the judge asked him, why did he say it? I was just kidding, right? I didn't have a bomb, but that doesn't matter because he knew that when he put that message on Yik Yak that it was gonna cause other people to be afraid. He might not have wanted them to be afraid, or maybe he did, but if the person who receives the message is actually afraid, you can be charged with this crime. And so it's a pretty scary one because we've had kids that are 17, 18, is anybody in here 18? A couple? Yeah. Well, don't do this because you'll be charged as an adult and you might have to go to jail. And we've even had kids that are younger than that be charged as adults because when the cops come in and investigate, guess what they say? Here, give me a show of hands. How many of you think that you're better with technology than your parents? Honestly. So guess what happens? When the cops come in and they say, hey, did you know the consequences of what you were doing? What would you say to them? No, maybe not. They don't care. Because they know that when you get onto Yik Yak and you send that message, your parents might not understand that that message is going to go to everybody and they're going to see it. But you know that, right? You know that. And so the cops are not giving anybody any breaks when they do this stuff. We've had kids in Nebraska that have been charged with making terroristic threats for cyberbullying online. So a lot of states have passed what we call Rebecca's laws. Nebraska was considering one this year, and I bet within the next couple of years they'll have one. And so here's where we get Rebecca's laws. This is Rebecca. She was a freshman high school student in Florida. Her peers got on Ask.fm and Kick Messenger and said things like, why aren't you dead? You should die. Wait a minute, why are you still alive? Go kill yourself. Really, really serious stuff. Tragically, Rebecca killed herself. In her parents' bathroom, she hung herself. Scary stuff. But then, because the girl who said the messages thought that what she was saying was anonymous, she gets back on the site and says this. Yes, I bullied Rebecca, and she killed herself, but I don't care. So guess what the cops said? The cops came in and actually charged this girl with a crime. They said you engaged in terroristic threats because you told somebody to hurt themselves. They said that you basically were part of the reason that she committed suicide. So the cops charged this girl with a crime. So now there are a lot of states that have passed laws which we call Rebecca's laws, which is basically kind of what we have with the terroristic threat statute. If you get online and you say things to somebody with the intent to cause harm to them, you can be prosecuted criminally. You can go to jail. You can be sent to, if you're a juvenile, you can be sent to what we call a juvenile detention center, which is a place that kids that are under 19 go. That's their version of jail, right? Really serious consequences. Here was a kid in Alabama. Now, does anybody even use MySpace anymore? Anybody even heard of MySpace? Quite a few MySpace users. Okay. Well, MySpace, for those that don't know, because MySpace was cool like when I was in college, like about 10 years ago. MySpace is basically a site that's like Facebook, right? You can get on, you can make comments, you can say things to other people. So this kid gets on his MySpace account and says to one of his classmates, "I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to plant a bomb in your locker. You deserve to die." So the student that got these messages printed them off, took them to the principal. What do you think the principal did? Called the cops. Oh yeah, called the cops right away. If you do something at school which could be a violation of the law, your administrators have no choice but to call the cops, right? So if you're engaging in this sort of behavior, this is what's going to happen. So anyway, they call the cops. The cops come in. They walk over to the kid's classroom, knock on the door. They walk up to the kid. "Are you Johnny Smith?" "Yeah, I'm Johnny Smith." They put Johnny Smith in handcuffs and they walk him out of the building in front of all of his classmates. They prosecute him, and he is charged with making terroristic threats, just for saying these things. Now, he's standing there in front of the judge. What do you think his defense was? "I was just kidding," right? Every time it's, "I was just kidding." And guess what the judge said? "I don't care. Don't care if you were kidding. You're going to jail." Anybody hear this one? This was somebody who got on Yik Yak at the University of Nebraska-Kearney and said, "I'm going to plant a bomb in the cafeteria." Okay, so somebody saw it on Yik Yak, turned it over to the police. They come in, evacuate the entire cafeteria, evacuate the union, shut down the entire university. Turns out there was no bomb. The state patrol called Yik Yak. And Yik Yak said, "Oh yeah, I know exactly who that was. Here's his IP address. Here's his telephone number." The state patrol then they basically can take information like that, like your IP address, which is basically the unique address that connects you to a computer or a phone or whatever it might be, and they can trace that to within a couple of feet where you are. So they find out exactly who it is, because when they trace the kid's IP address from Yik Yak, it leads them right to his dorm room. They know exactly where the kid is because they can figure out where it was posted from within a couple of feet. Right? So this just happened at UNK. We've had a couple of these things happen at schools in Nebraska. One not far from here, actually, just had a big bomb threat. What do you think the kid said? "I was just kidding," right? Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Okay, this is another one that we've seen. Have you guys heard of these rumor confession sites? Yeah. Yeah? They were really popular last year. I hope they're not that popular now, because one of these sites was basically a site where somebody set it up anonymously, so people would send direct messages to that Twitter handle. You know what I'm talking about? The Twitter handle would then take that message and tweet it out. So there were 1,500 kids in Nebraska that were following this site. So it would say something like, "The Neligh-Oakdale basketball team is no good." I would send that message to this person. That person would then take the message and would tweet it out on that site. So everybody following would see that message. Now, they were a lot meaner than that. I'm sure your basketball team's awesome, right? Okay. But that's the sort of thing that they would do. So the school got so sick of it that they called the cops, and the cops actually got a hold of Twitter. And Twitter said, "You know, yeah, we probably shouldn't have that. Here's the information for the kid that was doing it." Went in, found him right away. Right? So even if you think, so this kid thought, "Oh, I'll be slick. I'll have everybody send me private messages so nobody will see them. Basically, when I do this tweeting, nobody will have any idea who I am or where I'm from." Oh, we're back. Okay. Before we get to sexting, any questions about cyberbullying? Yeah, question?
What if somebody hacks into
Yeah, so what if somebody either steals your phone or hacks into your phone and sends it from your account, right? If you find out that that happened, you should tell somebody. Because if you don't tell somebody, then they're going to get to assume that it came from you. So if somebody hacks your phone, you should tell somebody. Tell your parent, tell a teacher, tell an administrator. It's a good question. Yeah?
Did you hear about what happened like with St. Mary's?
There's been a lot of inappropriate stuff happening. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay, yeah. Believe me, guys, stuff like this is happening all across Nebraska. It's not just here. It's not just around here. We've had cases all the way from Omaha out to Scotts Bluff. So this is not unique to anything around here, okay? All right, sexting. Raise your hand again if you've heard of sexting or know what I mean when I say sexting. Be honest. Come on. Some of you are raising your hands and the rest of you are liars, right? All right. So this is what I mean when I say sexting. This is taking an inappropriate picture of yourself, having an inappropriate picture of somebody else, and then sending that on, whether it be via a text message or Snapchat, Snap video, pictures on Snapchat, whatever it might be. That's what I mean when I'm talking about sexting. Sending messages or photos with explicit content in them, okay? How common is sexting? This study was done by Drexel University just this last summer. It said that 50% of all teens are engaged in sexting. Do you guys believe that?
Yeah.
Yes? Right? So most of you raised your hands. Now that's pretty crazy, right? Look, you and the person sitting next to you, odds are this says one of you will engage in sexting. Maybe you already have. It's pretty crazy, right? That's a lot of people. Who here knows, does anybody know what the consequences are for sexting? Who here thinks you can get in trouble if you sext? If you get caught? Raise your hand if you think you can get in trouble if you get caught for sexting. But still half of you are going to do it. Right? And that's what cops know. And that's what judges know. That even though you know that it's wrong, you're still going to do it. And now we're going to talk about some of the consequences if you get caught. So sexting is dangerous. There's an incident at a local Catholic school in Lincoln. There was a guy that was a registered sex offender. He was a pedophile. He created fake accounts, and he friended people on these social media accounts, other kids that were in the neighborhood. As soon as they accepted his friend request, he started sending them nude pictures. He said these nude pictures were of himself. Turns out they were just pictures that he found on the internet. It was a 55-year-old guy that was sending these pictures to girls that he had friended on social media accounts. He then, because he sent them pictures, asked the girls, well, would you have to send me pictures back? What do you think some of the girls did? Sent pictures back. He gets these pictures. He tells the girls, now, either you come meet me at the park after dark, or I'm going to send these pictures to your parents. So one girl, what do you think she did? Snuck out of her house in the middle of the night. Her parents had no idea. It's about 10 o'clock. Her parents were already in bed. She scurries around the house, starts running down across the driveway in the front of the house. There happened to be a neighbor that was standing outside of his house. The neighbor, get this, the neighbor was standing outside of his house, right? He sees this girl running across the driveway and says, hey, what are you doing? She stops and says, well, I don't know. He catches her, right? Right before she's about to go meet this guy. So he stops her. She tells him what she's about to do. They call the cops. They go and they find this vehicle parked at the park. And they find a 55-year-old guy who was about to run off with this girl. She sent him nude pictures, was a complete stranger. He said that he lived in Lincoln. She lived in Lincoln. She thought, oh, I met another guy that's my age in Lincoln. The guy took her pictures, basically extorted her to come meet him, and was going to run off with her. We had another case. This happened in a town in western Nebraska. This is crazy if you think about it. There was a guy in Texas, 47-year-old guy in Texas. Have you guys seen or heard of the television show Catfish? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? Where you create fake accounts and basically convince somebody that you're somebody else. Well, there's this guy in Texas who's a registered sex offender in Texas who picked, of all the towns in the country, picked this small town in Nebraska. He created a bunch of fake accounts, like on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff. He creates these fake accounts, and he starts friending kids in Nebraska, trying to convince them that he's another high school kid in Nebraska. The guy from Texas travels all the way up here, convinces a girl that she needs to run out of the building and meet him. She's on her way out of the school building. A teacher happens to be standing there and says, "Hey, where are you going?" She bolts out of the building. The teacher bolts out of the building with her. He follows her, the female teacher follows the girl over to the car. They get right next to the car and they look in, and what do they see? A 47-year-old guy. And she thought that she was meeting a 17-year-old guy. He was probably going to abduct her. We would have heard that on the news. Luckily, there was the teacher that was standing there right when that happened. She had sent this guy pictures of herself. So he had convinced her to come to leave school. She thought they were dating. This guy was a guy living in Texas that just made up this fictional guy that was from Nebraska that was also a 17-year-old kid. Crazy stuff. This guy set up all sorts of fake accounts. Like I said, this guy from Texas, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and basically convinced this girl that he was another student in Nebraska, that he attended a high school in Nebraska. She had no reason to disbelieve him. This close to being taken away and abducted. Okay, here's a case, State versus Gallegos. This is a 16-year-old girl who met a 17-year-old male. He says, "I'm a 17-year-old male," on Kick Messenger. They had anonymous names. They didn't know who the other one was. They talked. They became friends. Eventually, I guess from what the case said, that she started to think they were like boyfriend and girlfriend. He asked her, "Will you take pictures of yourself nude and send them to me?" At first, she says no. She says no for several months. But then one night, he says, "Well, if you love me, you'll send me pictures, right?" So what does she do? Sent the pictures. He then says, "Either you come and meet me, and we're going to engage in sex acts, or I'm going to send these pictures to your parents." She says, okay, agrees to come meet him. She tells her parents. Parents call the cops. Cops actually have somebody on the police force who is a younger female who looks like she's really young. She looks like she's a high school student. She goes and sits in the car in the park. All of a sudden, she sees this guy walking up at the time that they were supposed to meet each other. What do you think she sees when she looks up at the window at this 17-year-old guy who's coming to meet the girl? That's not a 17-year-old guy, right? So this girl also was this close to being abducted by that guy. Crazy, crazy stuff. Here's the one thing I want everybody to take just a second. I want you to take this away from this presentation, okay? This is a really important thing that I think kids don't understand. If you engage in sexting in Nebraska, even if you're under 19 years old, it is a Class 4 felony. Does everybody know what I mean when I say felony? So there are different crimes in Nebraska. We have what we call infractions. Those are like speeding tickets. And then we have misdemeanors. That's like if you go in and steal a candy bar. And then we have felonies. Felonies are things like murder, rape, assault, really, really bad things. It's the worst classification of crimes that we have are felonies. And if you are sexting under 19 years old, and it doesn't matter if you're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, if you're sexting and you get caught, it is a Class 4 felony. Everybody repeat that with me. If you're sexting and you get caught, what happens? Go.
It's a Class 4 felony.
What do you get charged with if you get caught sexting?
Class 4 felony.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so, say, like, like a married couple. Like, is that illegal is that illegal too? Like, say you're like 25.
For a married couple?
Wife.
It could be. It might be. Depends on how the picture is used. Generally speaking, when we talk about getting caught sexting, at least for this stuff, it talks about pictures of a minor, right? So this law is something different. So this law says, if you send, even if you're the person who sends it, right? you are sending, if you take a picture of yourself and you're 17 years old, and you take a nude picture of yourself and you send it to somebody, you have created what we call child pornography. It doesn't matter if the picture is just of you. If you send it to somebody, you can be charged with this crime. The same thing goes if you're somebody who receives one of these pictures, right? Unless you report it right away, if you're found to have this on your phone, or if you forward that picture to some other people that you know, you can be charged with this felony. Now, generally speaking, you're going to be charged as what we call a minor. So there are crimes that apply to everybody. But when you're an adult, it's usually a little different than when you're a minor. When you're a minor, the consequences aren't quite as severe. But the problem is, you can be tried as an adult in these cases, even if you're under 19. Because when the Nebraska legislature debated this, they thought, should we really be charging kids with felonies if they're sexting? Most people who get it, who are caught sexting, what do you think they say? What's their defense? I was kidding, right? I didn't mean anything by it. I thought it was stupid. I thought it was no big deal. Guess what the legislature said? And guess what judges say? I don't care. If you are sending and receiving nude images of minors, even if you're a minor, you can be charged with a felony. If you are 19, we've got a lot of cases where a boy who was a senior maybe was dating a girl who was a junior. He goes off to college, she's then a senior in high school, he turns 19, they exchange these pictures. Cops find out, guess what happens? He's charged with a Class 3 felony. We have kids in Nebraska who have been charged with these felonies. You can go to jail for 5 years. 5 years in prison if you get caught sending or having one of these pictures. You can pay up to a $10,000 fine. Here's the kicker. You have to register as a sex offender. Does everybody know what I mean when I say register as a sex offender? There are certain crimes in Nebraska, such as rape and sexual assaults and really, really bad things that require you to register with the Nebraska State Patrol as a sex offender. It is a public registry. It then goes and gets uploaded to a national registry. So if you want to apply for a job someday, or if you want to go to college, or if you want to be a professional like a teacher, or a doctor, or a lawyer, or a dentist, they'll search for this. If you are a convicted sex offender, you will never be a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher. So we've got kids who have been engaging in sexting, get caught having the pictures on their phones, get charged with this crime, get convicted, even as minors, and have to register as sex offenders, meaning they probably won't go to college, they probably will never get a very good job, they'll never get a college scholarship to play sports, they'll never get to be a professional, they'll never get to do any of those things, all because they had one picture of their girlfriend or boyfriend on their phone. Pretty crazy, right? That's the law. This is what happens in Nebraska if you get caught sexting. This is Snapchat. For parents in here who don't know what Snapchat is, it's an app which lets you take a picture of yourself. You can put words in the app, you can draw on the app, you can make funny pictures and things like that. These are pretty good, right? But you guys think, any of you guys use Snapchat trying to like do the drawing thing? I think it's really difficult. These people are really talented. Anyway, so this up here, this 4 that you see up here, for people that haven't used Snapchat, that's because you can send the message and it will only last for a limited amount of time. So you take a picture of yourself, like this. You send it to one of your friends with only a 4-second delay on it. They hold their finger down on the screen, and they get to look at that picture for 4 seconds, and then it disappears. They can't retrieve the picture again, right? All you guys familiar with this? You're all Snapchat users, right? So what happens most of the time when Snapchat's used for sexting? This is a case from Virginia. This was a girl and a boy, 16 or 17 years old. They're dating. She takes a video of herself, a 4-second video of herself. She's completely nude. She's standing in the mirror. She sends the video to her boyfriend. He sees that he's got a video from her. He knows that she was going to send him this video. What does he do? Screenshots. Screenshots? Oh yeah. How many screenshots do you think he could get in 4 seconds? 13. 13 different screenshots. That's impressive, right? For all of you that have taken screenshots, that's a lot of screenshots. He takes 13 screenshots in 4 seconds. So at one point in time, the only person that had this picture was the boyfriend. He had 13 pictures on his phone that he took screenshots of the Snapchat video. They break up. What do you think happens? He sends them out, right? She breaks up with me. Oh, I'll show her. He sends the pictures out. But he doesn't send it to everybody in this case. He sends it to 3 friends. When these 3 friends get the pictures, what do you think they do? Oh, they send it to everybody, right? Everybody. We're talking, there isn't anybody in a 100-mile radius that doesn't have one of these pictures by the time it's all said and done. The one boy that initially had broken up with the girl, or the girl had broken up with, he wasn't at school that day. They go to his house, they arrest him. The rest of these kids, the cops walk into school, they're at lunch, they stand all of them up, they put all of them in handcuffs, and walk them out of the school. Each of these kids was charged with 12 different felonies. Why? The boys sent them all but one of the pictures. They sent on all 12 of these pictures multiple times. Each picture you have, when you send it, can be a felony. If you send the same picture to 15 people, it can be 15 felonies, right? So these kids are charged with big-time felonies. By the time this thing actually gets all said and done, they're 18. They are convicted. The jury, we talked about the jury, right? The jury is full of people from their community. The job of the jury was to decide, should these kids go to jail? Should they have to pay fines? What should happen to a 17-year-old kid who is sexting? Who takes these pictures once they've gotten them, instead of reporting them to the police or to an adult, they send them on to other people. The jury convicted them. These kids are in jail as we speak, right? All for sending these pictures. They appealed. You know what I mean when I say appeal? So in Nebraska, we have multiple levels of courts. We have the lower courts, which in Nebraska here would be a district court. That's the court that's local. Then we have what's called the Court of Appeals. They appealed it up to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals said, nope, sorry. Those kids are 16, 17, 18 years old. They know the consequences. They know what they're doing. Felony. They lose there. Then they appeal to what we call the Supreme Court. Nebraska has a Supreme Court too. The Supreme Court looks at it, and they have to decide, should we be charging 17-year-old kids with felonies? And guess what they said? Yep. Because they all know. They all know the consequences, and they did it anyway. This is, when I say the Lincoln Stars hockey team, does anybody know what I mean? It's a youth hockey team in Lincoln. Well, they're a minor hockey team, we'll call them. All the kids are under 18 years old. 2 boys on the team. They are from Minneapolis, Minnesota. They live with host families in Lincoln during the hockey season. They have a game in Fargo, North Dakota. They play the game, they go back to the hotel room. They find a girl on social media. That girl comes to the hotel room, they engage in sexual acts with the girl. One of the boys takes pictures of her. They leave the next morning on the team bus, come back to Lincoln. One of the boys that has the pictures on the phone gets to Lincoln, he posts them to Twitter. They're on there for a little while, the girl finds out, she's upset, she calls the boy says, yeah, I never should have posted that, I'll take it down. Takes the picture down. A few months pass. The girl's parents are so upset, they call the cops in Lincoln, or in Fargo. The cops in Fargo call the cops in Lincoln. By this time, the boys have already moved back to Minnesota. They're living with their parents again. So the cops in Fargo call the cops in Lincoln. The cops in Lincoln call the cops in Minneapolis. The cops in Minneapolis drive the kids back to Lincoln, and they're charged with felonies for sexting. Crazy, right? All that, one night, one stupid decision when they got back. It was only on Twitter for a couple of hours, and then it was taken down again. All of that, these boys will be registered sex offenders for the rest of their lives. They're never going to play in the NHL. They're never going to be professional hockey players. Crazy stuff. Here's one case in Michigan. We're going to get through it pretty quickly. 30 students, get this, they're all under 16 years old. 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. They have been getting and trying to accumulate naked pictures of their classmates. They have been saying to the classmates, either you send me a picture or I'll call you a prude. Or I'll tell everybody that you and I had sex. I'll make up stories about you to get you to send me the pictures. So what do the girls in the class start doing? Sending the pictures. The boys start trading the pictures like they're baseball cards. We've got pictures going all around the school of most of the girls in their classes. 13, 14, 15-year-old kids. The pictures are reported. The police come in. They eventually track back and figure out that it's a group of about 35 boys that really did this. They're the real ones to blame. They are the ones that asked for the pictures. Now here's the funny thing. The county attorney, now when I say county attorney, do you know what I mean? The county attorney is the person in your county that decides if they're going to charge crimes or not charge crimes. So like the police might arrest you, right? But the county attorney is the one that actually prosecutes the crimes. The county attorney in this case, the month before this happened, had been to the school, had told them that if you get caught sexting, what's the consequence? Class 4 felony. So they were sitting in an assembly just like you are, and she tells them, if you guys are sexting, this is a Class 4 felony. They did it anyway. So now she's got a decision to make. Most of the time, people who are minors, meaning they're under 18, don't get charged with felonies because they don't know what the law is. But these kids knew what the law was, right? In Michigan, there may be 30 people that are under the age of 16 who are charged as adults, meaning they could go to jail for soliciting child pornography because they asked for pictures, right? For creation, because in some cases, the boys actually took the pictures. For distribution, because they sent the pictures to other people, and for possessing child pornography, because they took the pictures that they got and kept them on their phones. 4 felonies for each of these boys. Right? So if you're engaging in stuff like this, you now know what the law is. You are at risk if you are engaging in sexting and being charged with a felony, even as a minor. This is the case, Florida v. Alpert. This one's crazy. They're dating. This is Mr. Alpert. He's 17 years old, dating his girlfriend. She sends him pictures. They break up. What does he do? Sends it to everybody, right? Except for in Mr. Alpert's case, I mean everybody. He goes into his phone. He hits select all in his contacts. He sends these pictures to all of his contacts. His parents, her parents, their pastor at church, the school administrators, the principals, superintendents, the parents of all of his friends, some family members of his who live in a different state, some family members of his who live in a different country. He sends these pictures to everybody. He's charged with crimes in Florida, by the United States, and even was considered to be charged by national people. Right? In a case very similar, Mr. Albert's wasn't a case that got that, but there's a case very similar to his where they were going to charge him with international crimes for sending these pictures to different countries. Right? So if you send these to people out of state, that's another set of crimes. Right? So it's not just the worry that you have that you're sending them to somebody here. If those pictures then get forwarded on, you can get in just as much trouble. Mr. Alpert, of course, is convicted of all sorts of different accounts of distribution of child pornography, and he is a registered sex offender. Can't go to college, can't get a good job. We've kind of been through that, right? So registered sex offender is a pretty big deal. Mr. Alpert was one of the earliest cases we had. But basically, he was charged, and they said, yep, sorry, don't care that you were only 17 when it happened. Yeah?
Isn't there certain levels of how long you register them?
It's a good question.
Some of them you register for life, and other ones are like 5 years.
It's a good question. Aren't there certain levels of how long you have to register as a sex offender? In Nebraska, no. There used to be levels. In Nebraska now, universal registry, right? No longer can people see if you're a level 1, level 2, or level 3 offender. Now we have a universal sex offender registry. So if you're applying for a job or trying to go to college, and they Google your name, guess what they're going to find? That you're a registered sex offender. We've actually had a couple of different suicides. Both of these girls ended up committing suicide as a result of sexting. Then they break up. Then their boyfriend sent pictures to everybody, and they get bullied, they get coerced, harassed. People are trying to get them. This girl, Jessica Logan, she sent pictures to her boyfriend. By the time they got done investigating her case, the pictures had made it all the way from, I think she's from Ohio, to New York. and to Texas because people were forwarding them on to everybody they knew. She got random Facebook messages from people who were asking her, hey, send me more of these pictures or I'll tell your parents. Right? All because her boyfriend sent them on after they broke up. Both of these girls end up committing suicide because the bullying and harassment and embarrassment that they felt was so bad. So this is why we say you got to tell somebody. If you see something like this, even if it's not of you, you have to tell somebody. It can really be ruining somebody's life. So obviously you shouldn't engage in it. But if you see it happening, you need to tell someone. Yeah?
Sure. It's kind of sexist because you're just showing guys doing this. Girls do it to guys.
Absolutely. It's a good point. I don't mean to be sexist at all. He's saying I'm only showing it happening to girls. It happens to guys all the time. There's another case that I don't have up here where girls were sending guys pictures and then calling the cops to try to get them in trouble. Right? So this, believe me, this is happening across the board. Don't assume that this is just guys. Now statistics say that for the most part, guys putting pressure on girls is how this starts. But it absolutely happens the other way too. County attorneys in Nebraska. Almost 80% of the different counties in Nebraska have had a case where they have charged a minor with sexting. So this is happening. Right? I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not saying it just to scare you. There are actually people your age that are being charged with these felonies. Just a couple of quick things. A majority of this starts with boyfriend-girlfriend. And here's what a judge says about, well, I thought it was private. Doesn't matter. If you put it on the internet, you have no expectation of privacy. Snapchat, Twitter, all these people, they will turn your stuff over. Did you know that Snapchat keeps a copy of all of your pictures and videos? Every single one, right? Snapchats don't disappear. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Snapchat's disappearing videos don't actually vanish. Again, they have a copy of all this. If the cops ask them for it, they'll probably get it. When you're sending the Snapchats, those don't disappear like they try to get you to believe. They're there forever. Somebody will have a copy of them. Nothing you send will go away. People are checking. People online are checking to see if you've engaged in cyberbullying, sexting, that kind of stuff. For example, college recruiters. Andrew Rodriguez, the guy that played offensive line in Nebraska from Aurora. Does anybody remember him? He was a couple years ago. He played college football at Nebraska. Doing this presentation at his high school, he walks up afterwards and says, hey, you know what, this is funny. You said that college recruiters are checking whether I'm doing this. When Bo Pelini and his staff started to recruit me at Nebraska, they asked me, what was my Twitter handle? What was my Facebook? Did I have a Facebook account? Did I have a Twitter account? They went and checked all of his activity to see, because basically what you're doing when you're online is you're painting a picture for everybody to see of what type of person you are. So there were some kids that just stopped being recruited because the things that they were putting online were obviously throwing up red flags for the coaches. Showing bad judgment, being mean to other people. This sort of stuff sticks with you. It's not something that you do one time at night to be funny, right? This stuff is there forever. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, don't do it. I mean, that's the main thing. Pressure from guys is the reason that girls say they do it. Guys, it's just the same kind of thing. Girls will pressure you. Well, if I send you pictures, you send me pictures. Happens all the time. It's easier to be mean if you're behind a keyboard. Everybody agree? It'd be difficult to say some of the things that kids are saying to each other to their faces. So think about it. If you wouldn't say it to their face, or if you wouldn't want somebody else to hear it, then don't say it. And report it. If you get one of these pictures, or if you see this stuff happening, there are some schools who are changing their policies to say, if you know that cyberbullying is happening, and you don't report it, then we'll impose consequences on you. So all of you that just raised your hand, right? If you've ever seen cyberbullying, ask yourself, did I report it when I saw it? Because if not, you could get in trouble too, right? This is how severe it's gotten that we need to get this stuff to stop. And consider the recipient's reaction. We talked about this. What do most kids say? Why are they doing this stuff? It's a joke. Didn't mean it. You guys get it. 20% of teen boys say that when they get a girl to engage in this stuff, they expect to hook up. The number is actually much higher. When girls know that guys are doing it, they know that they're willing to hook up too. Okay, so the messages that you're sending are sending messages to the recipient that you might not intend. Just keep that in mind. This is what a judge said about joking. You're guilty regardless of your joking intent. Doesn't matter. There is no joking. The judge is just looking at what is on the screen. They're not looking at whether you were laughing when you put it on there, right? They're looking at what's on the screen. Okay, the grandma rule. Has anybody heard of the grandma rule? If you wouldn't say it to your grandma, don't say it. If you wouldn't send it to your grandma, don't send it. Who here would send a dirty picture to your grandma? No, right? Sick. Who here would say mean things to your grandma just to be funny? Nobody. I know it's stupid, and I'm not trying to insult you by saying this. If you follow this rule, you'll stay out of trouble, right? Okay, that's all anybody have any questions? We're a little bit over because of the blackouts. Anybody have any questions? One question?
Yeah, what if somebody's
If somebody's forcing you to do it, you got to tell somebody, right? Because remember, the judge is just looking at what's on the screen. So unless you tell somebody what's happening, they're never going to know. Any other questions? Hey, what happens if you get charged with sexting in Nebraska? What do you get?
Class 4 felony.
Okay, all right, I'm just checking. All right, thank you guys.